Welcome to the Workbench and welcome to another episode of Wheels Wings TV. Today from Kinetic we have the new 148 scale IA58 Pucará. Let's have a look. First sprue is a duplicate, and we've got our main wheels, some very nice hub detail, the brake detail in the back and the front part of the hub, which is actually molded through, so we have some good depth there. Got some various panels. I assume those are for the engine cowling. With the nice little fastener detail and some grills. These are probably landing gear doors. Very nice little hinge detail on one edge here. Some drop tanks. Even a little tiny connector, fastener, little raised pieces on the fins here, which are nice. Got a triple ejector rack, raised rivets and wiring detail and whatnot. These look quite good. Looks like ejector seat pieces. Of course, our big propeller here. Looks good, nice and thin. Hardly even a parting line, let alone flash. Some more little sway braces and bits and bobs. Very fine little wiring bits or plumbing of some sort. Little actuators. To be control column, I believe. Looks really good with the boot and buttons and trigger all molded in, although a little bit of a mold line on that, so you might lose some of those details cleaning that up. Very nice detail on the inner surface of the gear bay doors, fasteners, and the dimples. Very nicely done. Only one little ejector pin in the detailed area and then a larger one in this open spot, so I'm going to assume that there's either a separate piece that goes in there or there's no detail in there, so we can scrub that out and not have to worry about it. Off to a good start. Another small sprue. We have another wheel, so I'm going to assume the main wheels and the nose wheel are all the same size. This does have a very subtle flat molded into it, so I'll give the impression of some weight. Got our main gear legs and our nose wheel leg. Those are very nice. Some ejector pins, unfortunately, on the back side, but barely any parting line on the parts, so not too bad, I suppose. Looks like, I think that's an insert for the one of the cannon troughs, and that's really nice. Little fastener detail all around the periphery. Various other actuators and struts and whatnot for the landing gear assembly, all nicely done and very slim pieces, so you definitely want to be careful getting those all off the sprue. You might want to use a saw instead of your sprue cutters. Very cleanly molded parts. Hardly any flash and the barest amount of a parting line. So Kinetic have obviously spent a lot of time on these molds. Our fuselage halves, and looks like horizontal tail, some separately posable flaps or control surfaces. Very nice panel lines, relatively sharp. And we've got actual raised and recessed rivets where appropriate. So you'll want to be very careful in some of these areas you don't completely obliterate those if you have to sand anything down. Nice deep line where the rudder meets the tail. Always like to see those. Subtle little differences and little raised panels and fillets, and not just one consistent level of plastic. Even this little door here slightly raised up. The surrounds for the cannon ports here, firing ports, slightly raised, maybe a little too prominent, but that could be exactly the thing on the real airplane. It's got a nice deep and you should say radiused join there for the elevator to the horizontal tail. I always like it when you get nice deep lines here instead of just a panel line that it just blends in with everything else. Looks like there's a little bit of a texture on the plastic, but it feels very smooth. Beautifully done rivets all over. Nice crisp panel lines. A little bit of cockpit detail molded into the halves. Some ejector pin marks, but I'm going to assume most of those are going to be hidden or easily removed. And Kinetic have all of the sprue connections on the mating surface, so you're not going to lose any detail on the outside, but you're going to have to be very careful that you get all of that cleaned off or you're going to give yourself fit problems. But that looks very nice. And our wings, cockpit, and other internal bits. More nicely done rivets, panel lines, hinge. The little raised hinge lines and all these separate panels are really, really nice. Various little raised, making excellent use of raised and recessed detail. And you got these little, I want to say those are probably little vortex generators just ahead of the aileron here on the wing. Nicely, very, very, very fine. So you want to be careful if you have to do any sanding or anything there, you don't destroy those. More very, very nice. I love these. I love these hinges. Very nicely done. We got our cockpit tub. Of course, this was a 2-seat aircraft. We got our throttle quadrant. Little hint of some control levers there, but you may want to cut those off and add something on a bit more substantial. I mean, of course, consult your references because these controls could just be very small. And some basic little console detail, but if you want to go to town, I'm sure there'll be resin or photo-etch options down the road. wheelbase. Very sharply done. Not a lot, but just enough, a little bit of plumbing and whatnot in there to busy things up, so it's not completely Spartan. You got another drop tank with some raised lines, so you want to be careful when you join the two halves together, you don't completely lose those. Recessed everything else. Instrument panels are just the raised bezels. So I'm assuming we'll probably get a decal for that, but also easy to grind all that off if you're going to be using some photo etch replacements. But all in all, not too bad looking in the least. Very nicely done. And the last sprue are clear parts. Nice and clear. Not a lot of lensing, unless you're looking straight down the sides. So even with the cockpit canopy closed, you're still going to be able to see whatever detail you put in there. So those are good. Framing has got a nice sharp edge to it, and it's slightly textured compared to the actual clear areas, so that'll make masking a lot easier. A little bit of scuff marks on there just from the packaging. So perhaps they could have maybe put a little bit of foam or something in there, but that wouldn't be a dip in some acrylic clear or a little bit of a polish with some compounds and take that right out. Sprue attachment is on the edge and not on the actual surface you're going to see, so that's nice. Nothing on either end, just the one attachment on the side. So you could probably even, if you're leaving that separate, you could probably just nip that chunk of sprue off and have a little handle there to hold onto this while you paint it. And a few other, looks like landing lights, some other clear pieces, wingtip lights, I guess. Those all look good. Not the best clear parts I've ever seen, but far from the worst. And a small fret of photo etch. So we got some harnesses and probably some bits for the canopy and some other bits and bobs here, some really fine mesh. Seems nice and thin, really shiny, so only minimal of attachment points, so that shouldn't be too hard to deal with. So if you don't like photo etch, this shouldn't give you too much grief. And our instructions. So a nice little historical blurb on the Pucará. I've been informed by a native Spanish-speaking buddy of mine that the emphasis is on the second A, not the first A. So in English, we typically call it the Pucará. Apparently it's Pucará, which I'm probably still butchering, but at least I'm trying. This, of course, was an indigenous Argentinian design, saw notable use in the Falklands War against the English, and was sold to at least a couple other countries, if I'm not mistaken. Usual symbol legend, some suggested tools, don't put it in your mouth. Okay, they give you, that's nice, individual codes for each sprue, so that's very Tamiya-like. So you bugger up a part or it's missing, you can get a hold of their customer service and be like, hey, I'm missing this fuselage sprue, here's the code, I need one of those, thank you very much. sprue map, color callouts in popular, more or less popular brands, Vallejo, Mr. Color, Tamiya, Humbrol, Ammo, MiG. Apparently you can download at least the manual and the painting guide from their website as well, so you can always make up a few copies so in case they get dirty. So I'll start with the cockpit, of course. Ejection seats go together. Basic frame, cushions, headrest. There's photo-etch seat belts. Placements on roughly where they go, but you may want to look up some additional reference. Now, obviously you have to make 2 seats because it is a 2-seat aircraft, but I don't know why they would just duplicate. Why not just say ×2, repeat, instead of just printing it all over again, but hey, it works. Instrument panels go in, rudder pedals, control columns, combings, consoles. Of course, you're going to want to paint all that up and then put your seats in. Instrument panels are just in, looks like probably black. Cockpit is in FS36270. That's probably like dark gold gray or dark ghost gray. Okay, so you do have some optional holes to open up here for pylons, so depending on what kind of weapon load you're gonna go with. Now, of course, we don't get any weapons with this kit, we just get drop tanks, so you're gonna have to source out some Hasegawa weapon sets or some Brassin or Ares or somebody like that if you're using you know, cluster bombs or high explosive or whatever these might have been armed with, rocket pods maybe. A few more holes on the side to open up. These are all listed as optional, so it's, I guess, specific to the 58D variant. So if you're doing any other one, I guess you can just ignore all of this. A couple of pieces go into the nose wheel bay. Nose wheel goes onto the lower half of the cockpit. Then we got one of those gun trough inserts. We got some cockpit detail going in the side, so that's probably going to cover up some of those ejector pins. Cockpit gets trapped into the fuselage. Fuselage halves go together. Wheelbase go into the lower wing, upper wing, engine cowling pieces, and I guess the exhaust. And the forward part of the cowl. Okay, so 2 halves go together. Pylon goes in. I'd be tempted to leave that off till later, perhaps, up to you. That gets... this gets a little busy here. Would have maybe like to see you breaking this up into, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Split that up a little bit because that could be a bit confusing, but not bad. And then mirror image, wash, rinse, repeat for the opposite side. And a little combing around the instrument panel goes in place with some photo etch. Piece goes on the spine. Fuselage goes onto the lower wing. Horizontal tail pieces go together and then get attached to the vertical tail. We've got some looks like actuator pieces going into the lower wing. And then our wheels go together, landing gear, strut goes in along with all the supporting features. Of Of course, you'd want to test to see how much of this you could put in after paint. At the very least, you want to leave the wheels off. Same wash, rinse, repeat for the opposite side, just with the addition of the nose wheel. Once again, probably want to test to see how many of these you could install after paint, just to keep Murphy at bay so you don't accidentally snap something off and then have to call customer support to get replacement parts. Doors for landing gear go on, along with some couple little dinguses there. Got our flaps going on, and they don't say anything about posable, but I would assume, depending on this little connector here, you could probably pose these drooped, but you'd probably want to consult some references to be certain, at least in terms of how much deflection and whether these would be drooped when sitting on the ground. So pictures seem to show them in a drooped, so I guess default position is drooped, so maybe you need to modify these if you're going to have them in a neutral position. So you'll want to do some test fitting there before you commit to what you're going to do. Let's see, some blade antennas going on, once again specific to the 58D variant. A few other little greeblies. Be, I guess, ejection chutes for the cannons, I would assume. Little hatch, some more blade antennas, and I guess pitot tube or something. So lots of parts you're probably going to want to install at the end of the painting process. Canopy. There's something. Got to put your big boy brave pants on. You got to drill a hole in the canopy and then glue a piece into it. So be careful there. And you also got some photo etch and a whole bunch of photo etch to glue on there. So definitely be careful. Another little dingus goes on the side here. It's probably a angle of attack sensor or something. Gun sight going into the windshield. Windshield goes on with its wiper blade. On the open canopy, you've got some actuators here that go to the rear. You can also put our propellers together and stick them. And it might be you might want to leave some of these pieces separate for painting, depending on how you like to work. Some more really tiny little photo etch static dischargers on the tail. I don't know. Those are going to appear kind of flat, so you may want to use like some really fine wire, some stretch sprue. I've even seen some kind of DIY, toothbrush bristles and things like that used for these, but at least they do give you a photo etch option. Better than a big honkin' plastic thing. Pylons with the sway braces go together. Small drop tanks, big drop tank. Triple ejector racks with all their hardware go together. And nothing to hang off of them, unfortunately. But they do show you where any of these can go. So you could have a triple ejector rack on any of the pylons, a small drop tank on any of the pylons, but the big one only goes on the center line. Alright, so paint schemes. We've got First one is an Argentinian aircraft, flown by Major Carlos Tomba. I believe this is a Falklands War aircraft. So these had like kind of a green and tan camouflage. Of course, got all your MiG callouts with federal standard numbers, so you will be able to match that to your Vallejo or your AK Real Color or whatever your favorite brand happens to be. I'm assuming they've got a full color download and they just print this in black and white for economy, but this day and age would have been nice to see the, you know, at least the color callouts done in color. Especially when you're dealing with really dark camouflage colors. But we have a second aircraft of the Uruguayan Air Force. And your Pucará is done. And our decals. So these are all kinds of good because we got designed by two Bobs who do good stuff, printed by Cartograph who do good stuff. So these should be very drama-free. Of course, we got Uruguay and Argentinian options. The Uruguayan one with a big wild boar on the nose. Unlike other modern aircraft, not a lot of stencil detail, just rescue markings and ejection seat markings and whatnot, and propeller warning stripes. So not a decal heavy option, which is nice to see. Relatively thin. Just enough clear carrier to get the job done and not a lot of excess. So those look really good. Shouldn't give you any problem. So, the new Pucará from Kinetic. I know this is a kit that a lot of people, and one in particular, have been very excited for, as this aircraft has not been well served in plastic. I believe Special Hobby did it in 72nd scale, but I think this is at least the first modern 148 scale injection kit of this aircraft. Iconic aircraft from the 1980s, and if you are a fan of South American aircraft, this is probably one that's been on your to-do list for a long time. And it looks well served by Kinetic. Very nicely done kit, cleanly molded, nice panel lines, raised and recessed detail where necessary, and very nicely done. Awesome decal sheet. Instructions look sufficient. I definitely say probably log onto their website and get yourself the color copy of those paint guides, or at least, you know, get some reference material together. Definitely an awesome looking new kit of a relatively underrepresented aircraft, which is always great to see. All of the unsung heroes and the lesser known subjects getting the royal treatment from the top manufacturers we have these days. Of course, I'd like to give a big gracias to my amigo Felipe for letting me rip apart his new kit here. If you want to see more content like this, give us a like, hit that subscribe button. Thank you very much. We'll catch you next time.